This is part 2 of the series asking, is Australia the least sustainable country in the world? If you missed part 1, then you can find that by clicking on the link in the description. Part 1 provides an introduction to the data on Australia's carbon emissions compared to other nations over time, whereas this clip will focus on Australia's electricity market and what are the cost implications of these changes for homeowners. So how does Australia supply its electricity mix now? Over the course of a year, we can see a small increase in solar production over the summer months, otherwise the energy mix remains relatively similar for the national electricity market that supplies the entire east coast of Australia, while Western Australia and Northern Territory have their own network. Over the course of a 24-hour period, we can see the impact of solar power throughout the day. Wind power is far more consistent but tends to provide more electricity at night in contrast to solar. The maximum instantaneous mix of renewables is currently 64.1%, and that was achieved on the 18th of September 2022. But this only relates to a time window between the hours of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m, which is outside the hours of peak demand. To achieve significant impacts, this needs to be continuous throughout the day and cover periods of peak demand as well. To theorise how this could be achieved, simulations have been conducted using this same open source data, but with a theoretical implementation of 100% renewables. And this is how the energy mix would look in this scenario over a 7-day period. So from this we can see that 100% integration of renewables is theoretically possible. But how do we get there? And how far away are we from that right now? The electricity sources vary a lot from state to state, and we can see from the differences of supply and demand that South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales share electricity between their network. Tasmania is clearly the most sustainable, but is a unique case that is able to rely almost entirely on a constant supply of hydroelectricity. South Australia also has a large proportion of renewables throughout the day, and substitutes this with gas power in the early hours of the morning, as shown in this graphical screenshot taken at 1 a.m. in the morning shown here. Victoria also has a large proportion of renewables but relies heavily on production of brown coal, which is much less efficient and more carbon intensive than the black coal that dominates the New South Wales and Queensland markets. South Australia provides some indication of how these other states could be providing their electricity on a lower carbon emissions basis but on a smaller scale. This is how their energy mix looks over a 12-month period and over 24 hours. In comparison to my home state of Victoria that provides its energy from this small region in the Latrobe Valley. The coal provides the baseload power and the periods of peak demand are supplied by gas and hydro. So what other factors influence this energy mix? Is it just the time of day? The market in Australia has been privatised, so energy is supplied to the market based on the demand, which is reflected in this price over a 24-hour period. The Australian Energy Market Operator does administer some regulations around when generators need to supply power, but otherwise energy generators are able to choose when to supply power based on when it is most profitable to do so. There are regular fluctuations between the same time periods of peak demand in the morning and the evening, and the price varies based on the necessity for the supply to accurately match the demand at any point in time. This wholesale price represents about 32% of the cost transferred to the customer. The other major component is the network costs, and this includes the installation and maintenance of the power lines to get the electricity to its customers. Due to numerous factors, the energy market operator AEMO recently had to suspend this spot price so the market didn't increase out of control. Full details would need to be a topic for another video, but basically this was mainly due to a combination of high gas prices, aging coal power generators, and a combination of other factors. This initiated energy generators to attempt to maximise their profitability under these unforeseen circumstances by withholding capacity from the grid. AEMO were then forced to take control of the market and force the generators to produce enough energy so rolling blackouts weren't experienced throughout the network. Observing the energy prices over a longer time period, they have historically matched inflation. This is shown by the similarity to the Consumer Price Index that provides an indication of the currency's inflation and relative value of the Australian dollar. Compared to other countries, Australia is below the OECD average, and converting this figure from US dollars back to Australian dollars, it is 27 cents per kilowatt hour. So, what drives these differences? The levelized cost of energy has been reducing dramatically for wind energy and solar, and this is reflected in the investment in these technologies over the past couple of decades. There is some discrepancy on the costs, and this will vary from country to country. Globally, the International Energy Agency provide this comparison and a brief summary based on the major regions. So, what about in Australia? The CSIRO, which is the Chief Scientific Research Organisation in Australia, they generate this yearly report to update the costs and forecast reductions over time. All of these analyses don't include storage and integration costs. So to provide a more accurate comparison, this was included in the CSIRO report. This is an updated figure from 2021 to 22 that again compares fossil fuel sources with the renewables, including integration costs shown on the right hand side. This accounts for the necessity of battery storage along with transmission and frequency regulation requirements for integration of variable renewable sources. These costs were calculated as only a marginal increase in cost ranging from $19 to $28 per megawatt hour depending on the share of renewables in the grid. And this section adds a carbon risk premium based on the fact that these fossil fuel-based sources are becoming less financially viable. This data was included without the carbon risk premium in the earlier 2017 Finkel review, which helped form the basis for the government's energy policies. However, it seems not all of the advice was taken on board, because despite renewables with integration costs being the cheapest form of new electricity generation, they haven't always been the most supported by the then Liberal government. So what were the proposed commitments? We'll have to delve into the government interventions in the final part 3 of this series. This will also include the impacts and the forecast for the future. You can find that by clicking on the link here or in the video description. And if you learned something new from this video, then please help me grow this channel by clicking the like button. Subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this. And I'll see you for the next video with Frank Sustainamastly.